When the 75-year-old hunch cleaner trembled as she touched the $1 million Stradivarius violin, the entire rehearsal hall fell silent. No one knew the seemingly ordinary disabled woman was once a combat medic and talented violinist in Vietnam. The majestic Carnegie Symphony Hall stood proudly in downtown Boston, its marble columns and gold leaf ceilings housing one of America's most prestigious orchestras. This was just a music venue. It was a temple where $1 million instruments produced sounds that moved souls, where musicians in tailored suits performed for audiences who paid more for a single ticket than most people earned in a week. Among the polished brass railings and portraits of legendary conductors moved a quiet, unnoticed figure, Eleanor Cooper, a 75-year-old cleaning lady with thinning silver hair and a pronounced stoop in her shoulders. Her weathered hands, particularly her damaged left one, moved methodically with a dust cloth across ornate surfaces. Her faded blue button-up shirt and loose-fitting slacks hung from her thin frame, a stark contrast to the elegant attire of those who belonged in these hallowed halls. Students from the affiliated conservatory barely noticed her. To them, she was just the old cleaning lady, invisible, forgettable, someone who existed on periphery of their musical excellence. But underneath Ellie's humble exterior lay an extraordinary past that few bothered to discover. 50 years ago, Eleanor Cooper had been a prodigy, her fingers dancing across violin strings with natural grace that caught the attention of every instructor at the New England Conservatory. She had been offered a full scholarship, praised for her ability to imbue classical pieces with raw emotion and soul. But when Vietnam escalated, she had made a choice that changed everything, enlisting as a combat medic determined to serve her country. The war had taken more than just her youth. A mortar explosion during a desperate attempt to evacuate wounded soldiers had damaged the nerves in her left hand and left shrapnel in her leg, giving her the permanent limp that accompanied her silent movements through the hall. The injuries had destroyed her technical precision, shattering her dreams of musical greatness. Michael Harrington, the Carnegie Symphony's renowned conductor, strode through the hall like he owned it, and in many ways he did. At 48, his sharp features and perpetual frown spoke of uncompromising standards that had earned the orchestra international acclaim. His custom-tailored conductor's jacket emphasized his authoritative presence, and musicians fell silent when he entered a room. "Excellence is non-negotiable," was his famous motto, repeated in interviews and during rehearsals. Music allows no room for mediocrity. Under his leadership, the orchestra had flourished, but his demanding nature and cutting remarks had earned him a reputation for brilliance tinged with cruelty. To Harrington, everyone in the building served as artistic vision, especially invisible workers like Eleanor Cooper, who kept his kingdom spotless while remaining conveniently out of sight. Neither could have imagined how their worlds would collide, or how a single melody would crack the carefully constructed walls between them. On a crisp autumn morning, Eleanor arrived earlier than usual. The orchestra had a charity gala performance that evening, and she wanted to ensure every corner gleamed. The empty rehearsal hall felt different in the morning light. Peaceful, almost sacred, with sunbeams dancing through high windows and illuminating the instruments left overnight. In the center of the stage, resting in an open case lined with purple velvet, lay the crown jewel of the orchestra, a 1713 Stradivarius violin worth over $4 million. It belonged to the orchestra, but Harrington had exclusive rights to determine who could play it. Currently, it was reserved for Sophia Chun, the evening's featured soloist. Eleanor approached slowly, drawn by an irresistible magnetism. Her cleaning forgotten, she stood before the instrument, memories washing over her like waves. Without thinking, she gently lifted it from its case, holding it with a reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. "Just once," she whispered to herself, positioning the violin against her shoulder. It fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting for her all these years. Her damaged left hand trembled as she pressed down on the strings, her right hand drawing the bow across them with remarkable steadiness. The first notes were hesitant. Then a melody emerged, not from sheet music, but from memory. It was taps, the military bugle call, but transformed into something hauntingly beautiful on the violin, infused with 50 years of buried grief and honor. The sound filled the empty hall, rising toward the ceiling with a purity that made the air itself seem to tremble. Eleanor closed her eyes, transported back to a time when her hands obeyed her will without question, when her future stretched bright before her, before bombs and death and sacrifice had rewritten her story. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The harsh voice shattered her reverie. Eleanor's eyes flew open to find Michael Harrington storming toward her, his face contorted with fury. Behind him, 3 orchestra members watched with wide eyes. "That is a priceless instrument, not a toy for the cleaning staff." Harrington snatched a violin from her hands, examining it for damage. "Do you have any idea what this is worth? More than you'll earn in 10 lifetimes. Eleanor's face flushed with shame. "I'm sorry, sir. You just what? Thought you'd play around with a Stradivarius." His voice dripped with contempt. "Go back to your mops and dusters, old woman. That's where you belong." One of the younger musicians snickered. The sound cut deeper than Harrington's words. Eleanor nodded silently, her shoulders slumping further as she returned to her cleaning cart. The brief moment of connection with her past vanished, replaced by the familiar weight of invisibility. She shuffled away, limping slightly, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the now silent hall. But Harrington's gaze followed her, a faint furrow in his brow betraying something unexpected: curiosity. In the days following the incident, Eleanor kept her head down, ensuring her cleaning route avoided direct contact with Harrington. But she couldn't help noticing that something had changed. Occasionally, she would look up to find the conductor watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. The charity gala approached rapidly, bringing with it the controlled chaos of final preparations. The performance would benefit veterans organizations, an irony not lost on Eleanor as she polished the donor recognition plaques in the lobby. During afternoon rehearsal 3 days before the event, disaster struck. Sophia Chun, the featured soloist, stopped mid-piece, her face contorted with pain. "My wrist," she gasped, clutching her arm. "I can't move it." The rehearsal halted as the orchestra's physician confirmed what everyone feared: a severe tendinitis flare-up. Sophia wouldn't be playing at the gala. "This is a catastrophe." Harrington paced backstage, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "The program is built around her performance of a Tchaikovsky. We can't replace that with orchestral pieces. The donors are expecting a showcase." Eleanor listened silently as she emptied trash bins nearby, invisible as always. "Call every soloist in New England," Harrington instructed his assistant. "Offer whatever it takes." But as the hours passed, the situation grew more desperate. Every capable violinist was already committed elsewhere. The gala, the most important fundraising event of the season, was in jeopardy. That evening, as Eleanor prepared to leave, she was startled by Harrington's voice behind her. "The piece you played." Taps. It wasn't just a melody. His voice was different, quieter, without its usual edge. "You adapted it with variations." "Classical training." Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "New England Conservatory. A long time ago." Harrington studied her, as though seeing her for the first time. "Before Vietnam, I assume. Your left hand shrapnel wound." "Yes." She was surprised he had noticed. "How did you—" "My father was in Vietnam, 101st Airborne." He paused. "What else can you play?" Eleanor laughed softly, the sound rusty from disuse. "At my age with these hands? Not much anymore." "That's not what I heard 3 days ago." His gaze was intense, calculating. "What's your story, Eleanor Cooper?" Perhaps it was a rare use of her name or the unexpected interest, but Eleanor found herself sharing the abbreviated version of her past. The scholarship, the choice to enlist as a combat medic, the explosion that saved 4 lives but cost her the music career she dreamed of. Harrington listened in uncharacteristic silence. When she finished, he remained quiet for a long moment. "My assistant ran a background check. He finally admitted, you were more than just promising. You were exceptional. Your instructor wrote that you had the rare ability to find the human pulse beneath technical precision." Eleanor looked away. That was another lifetime. "Come to my office tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Without waiting for a response, he turned and left. The next day, Harrington's proposition stunned her. Play at the gala. not as a featured soloist performing Tchaikovsky, but in a special segment honoring veterans, playing her version of Taps, followed by a folk melody arrangement. "I can't," she protested. "My technique is gone. My left hand can barely." "Your technique isn't what I want," Harrington interrupted. "It's whatever made that sound I heard. Technical perfection is everywhere in this orchestra. What you did with that melody, that's rare." Eleanor stared at him. "Why would you risk your reputation on a cleaning lady?" Harrington's answer surprised her. "Because this gala is for veterans, and no one in my orchestra has ever served." His expression softened slightly. "Some music comes from training. Some comes from living. You've done both." As she left his office, Eleanor's mind raced. Could she perform again after 50 years? The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Unknown to her, Harrington immediately called the orchestra board, preparing them for an unconventional addition to the program, and revealing the remarkable story of the woman who'd been cleaning their hall for nearly a decade. The night of the gala arrived with all the glamour Carnegie Symphony Hall could muster. Spotlights illuminated the building's facade as limousines deposited Boston's elite onto the red carpet. Women in designer gowns adorned with glittering jewelry moved alongside men in impeccable tuxedos, all gathering to support veterans' causes while enjoying an evening of world-class music. Backstage, Eleanor sat alone in a small practice room, dressed in the simple black pantsuit Harrington had arranged for her, modest compared to the orchestra's formal attire, but more elegant than anything she'd worn in decades. Her weathered hands trembled slightly as she gently rosined a bow. Harrington had insisted she use the Stradivarius. "It's symbolic," he'd said when she protested. "From cleaning it to playing it. The donors will eat that up." But Eleanor knew it wasn't just for show. The instrument's remarkable voice would compensate somewhat for her technical limitations. In the 3 days of private rehearsals, Harrington had worked with her patiently, helping her adapt fingerings to accommodate her damaged hand, focusing on the emotional core of the music rather than technical perfection. A stage hand appeared at the door. 5 minutes, Mrs. Cooper." Eleanor nodded, her heart pounding. Through the walls, she could hear the orchestra finishing Dvorak's New World Symphony to enthusiastic applause. Then Harrington's voice addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, tonight we gather to support organizations serving our veterans. While we had planned to feature our concertmaster in Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto, circumstances have led us to something perhaps more meaningful." He paused, and Eleanor could picture his commanding presence on stage. "For 9 years, a woman has cleaned our hall, polished our rails, and dusted our instruments. Few of us noticed her. Fewer still knew that before she served as a combat medic in Vietnam, she was considered one of the most promising violin students at the New England Conservatory." Murmurs spread through the audience. "Her hands that now clean our hall once saved lives under enemy fire. The same hands that were damaged defending her unit when they came under attack." Harrington's voice grew somber. "Tonight, Eleanor Cooper will show us that music, like courage, find a way to express itself even through broken vessels." Eleanor rose shakily, gripping the precious violin. The stagehand gave her an encouraging nod as she made her slow, limping way toward the stage. The bright lights momentarily blinded her as she emerged. The hall, which had seemed so familiar when empty, now looked alien, filled with hundreds of elegantly dressed strangers. Their polite applause held notes of confusion and curiosity. Standing center stage, Eleanor saw Harrington step aside, his usual imperious expression replaced by something that might almost be respect. She raised the violin to her shoulder, feeling the weight of the moment, of the years, of all she had lost and found. She began with Taps, the simple military farewell transformed into a violin solo that began softly, almost hesitantly, as she played. Images of young faces from her unit flickered through her memory, boys who never grew old, whose futures had been buried in distant soil. Her damaged left hand formed chords that weren't technically perfect but carried an authenticity no conservatory could teach. The melody evolved, incorporating elements of Bach's Chaconne, a piece about grief and transcendence. Though her vibrato wasn't as steady as it once had been, the emotion behind each note was unmistakable. Eleanor played not just with her hands, but with her life's experience. Every joy and sorrow visible in her weathered face. The audience sat motionless, many leaning forward in their seats. Some of the older attendees, those who recognized the depth behind the music, had tears streaming down their faces. When she finished the first piece, the silence was profound. Then, without pause, Eleanor began a folk melody, Shenandoah, the American folk song about longing for home. The simplicity of the tune belied the complexity of feeling she poured into it. This was music that spoke of loss, of love, of a country both beautiful and broken. As the final notes faded, Eleanor lowered the violin and bowed her head, exhausted by the emotional journey as much as the physical effort. For 3 heartbeats, the hall remained completely silent. Then it erupted. The audience rose as one, applause thundering through the hall. Cheers and shouts of bravo echoed from every corner. In the front row, several veterans in formal military dress stood at attention, offering her the highest sign of respect. Eleanor stood motionless, overwhelmed. Harrington approached, actually smiling as he guided her to center stage. He raised his hand for quiet, which came gradually. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor Cooper. The applause redoubled. An elderly man in a wheelchair, his chest adorned with service medals, wheeled himself to the stage and handed her a single rose, military precision in his movement despite his age. From one veteran to another, he said, his voice carrying in the now hushed hall. Thank you for reminding us that what's broken can still be beautiful. Eleanor accepted the rose, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. For decades, she had cleaned rooms where others made music. Tonight, she had reclaimed a piece of herself long thought lost. As she made her way off stage, supported by Harrington's steady arm, members of the orchestra rose from their seats, offering their own standing ovation, the highest tribute musicians could give to one of their own. The video of Eleanor's performance, captured by the symphony's official photographer, went viral within days. Cleaning Lady Veteran's stunned symphony audience became a headline across national news outlets. Millions watched as the elderly woman with damaged hands pulled sounds of remarkable beauty from a priceless instrument. The Carnegie Symphony established the Eleanor Cooper Fellowship for Veterans in Music, providing opportunities for former service members to study and perform. Harrington, whose reputation for coldness had seemed unshakable, became an outspoken advocate for recognizing talent in unexpected places. Music doesn't care about your pedigree or your job title, he told a reporter from the Boston Globe. It only cares about what you have lived and what you have to say. I overlooked that wisdom when it was literally cleaning my floors. Eleanor did not seek fame. She continued her cleaning duties, though now musicians greeted her by name, sometimes asking her opinion on interpretational questions. At Harrington's insistence, she began teaching a weekly masterclass on musical expression, her gentle guidance helping technically flawless students find the emotional core of their music. Perfect notes without meaning are just organized noise, she would tell them, her damaged hands demonstrating phrases with more impact than their young, agile fingers could produce. On Veterans Day, Eleanor Cooper played at Arlington National Cemetery, her adaptation of Taps, bringing healing tears to families of the fallen. As the notes soared above the white headstones, many reflected on how often we overlook the extraordinary stories of those we pass every day. The greatest music, Eleanor once said, like the greatest courage, often comes from those who have lost something but continue playing anyway. If this story moved you, consider taking a moment to thank a veteran in the comments below. They may not all play violin, but each carries a story worth hearing. What veteran in your life deserves recognition today? Your respect in the comments honors all who served.